I had a former church member years ago who was suffering from an eye disease, a condition, and he was slowly losing his sight. And I would sit with him, and I would pray with him, and I would talk with him, and listen to him. And this was a very grieving process for him as his sight was diminishing. And he said something, though, to me that both inspired me a little bit and troubled me a little bit. He said, "I think God is making me go blind so that I can see." Like I said, it was a little bit inspiring and a little bit troubling. I was inspired by his deep faith, that even as he was losing his physical capabilities, he believed so much in a God who loved him, who was with him, who would guide him through this. And it bothered me because the God that I know in Jesus Christ isn't one that takes away our sight. He gives us our sight. And of course, that's partly what he was saying. I think about in the Gospel of John, and you know that I love the Gospel of John. I love all of them, but John especially has something that's really unique about it. That there's a story of a man that the disciples and Jesus meet, whom we are told was born blind, meaning he could never see. And the disciples ask Jesus a question. They go, "Jesus, Master, Lord, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus responded. You might remember his response. He goes, "Neither. But this happened so that the glory of God could be revealed in him." And then you know the rest of the story, right? What happened? Jesus spit in the mud and spit in the dirt, and he made some mud and he put it on his eyes. He said, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." And he went and washed, and when the mud came off of his eyes, what happened? He could see. Our God is a God that restores things. He doesn't take them away. He brings them back. He gives them a fullness of what they didn't have before. Our God is a God who guides us through every part of our lives and gives us His Son, Jesus Christ, to show us the way, to let us see the way. And there's really nothing better than being able to see. I remember when I put those glasses on, well, an older model, but those are pretty old. When I put those glasses on for the first time, I realized how poorly I could see. But with them, I could see so clearly. It was like a miracle. We're going to meet someone today, the Apostle Paul, who really believed in everything that he could see and touch and feel. And Jesus Christ had to blind him in order for him to really see. Let's read together. We're going to read from Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. We call this Saul's conversion. This is an amazing passage. You've heard it before. We went through it verse by verse before, you remember. But it really doesn't get old. And when we think about this call to become something else in Jesus Christ, Paul teaches us something very important here. And God teaches us something through him. Let us hear the word the Lord gives us today. Acts 9, verse 1. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Amen. Okay, a few things that we're going to learn today from Saul's experience. Gerald, every time I talk about Gerald, he's not here. Just like when I talked about Terry, you weren't here last week, but you're here this week, but I'm not talking about you this week. Actually, I guess I just did, but anyway. But Gerald loves to tell this story. So Gerald, out there, wherever you are, thank you for this story. And I had lunch with him a few weeks ago, in fact, and he told me this story. He says, we are like living people on a train. And sometimes we're a train that's just not on the right track, right? And so the idea is this. Sometimes people believe that they're on the right track, that the way that they're going is the right way, that everything that they're doing is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But the reality is, and this is a reality for all of us who are born into sin, and all of us are born into sin. That's not to say that babies aren't beautiful and cute. I guess people can have babies on a train, right? That's not to say that some people are not good people. There's good people on a train, just like there's bad people or people that maybe are intoxicated or maybe they're asleep or whatever it is. But all of us are born into sin, and that's to say, this is the way Gerald says it, that we're on a train headed for destruction. The track is out. We're just going to keep going, and eventually it's just going to go right off the cliff. And this was Saul. Whether he realized it or not, he was on the wrong train. He was on the wrong track. Everything about his life was leading to destruction. To destruction. Now, you think about this for a minute. How did Saul live when we learn about him in the Scriptures? What kind of man was Saul? He was a Pharisee. He was someone very proud of who he was. He had been instructed in the ways of the law. When Jesus healed the man born blind, the word got to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees went to investigate the matter because Jesus did a couple of things. Number one, he healed on the Sabbath. Well, Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. Why can't he heal on the Sabbath? But to them, that was a sin. He healed on the Sabbath. Number two, they didn't believe that this man was really blind. They believed that Jesus was not giving proper credit to God. Well, Jesus was God, is God. They were on the wrong track. Saul learned from these very men, and his life was on the wrong track. Our lives, whether we acknowledge it or not, when we are born, are on the wrong track. And you say, wait a minute, now that's strange. I mean, children are beautiful and lovely, but Gerald says, look, there's a lot of great people on the train. It's still going to go off the track. And I think he's right. When we think about our lives, we have to examine the fact that oftentimes we are not on the right track. In fact, all of the times we're not on the right track unless we get off the train, which leads us to point number 2. Jesus comes along and he goes out of his way to get our attention. Gerald likes the illustration that the train pulls up beside the other train. He's like, hello, over there. Anybody want to come over? Come on over here. It's a lot nicer over here. There's a train. I know you like it, but the track is out ahead. But come on over to this train. It's a lot better, I promise you. People look at the train thinking, it's boring over there. We want to stay on this train. Jesus will go out of his way to get our attention. I think you see that over and over again in your life. Saul is going down the road to Damascus, right? He's walking down the road. He's going with his chest puffed out a little bit. I am a Pharisee, and I'm going to go to the synagogue in Damascus, and I'm going to find some people that follow this man named Jesus that we Pharisees don't approve of. And when I find them, I'm going to take them back to Jerusalem, and, God help them what happens next. That's what I'm going to do. Bam, the light comes down from heaven. And he's on the floor. He's on the ground. Now, I guess Saul, he could have gotten up after Jesus made his proclamation and told him what he needed to hear. And the people around him, they also experienced this. They didn't really understand what was being said, but they certainly saw the light. And Saul gets up and he could have opened his eyes and goes, I'm blind, but I'm still going to Damascus. He could have done that. But wouldn't he have been awful foolish to do that? I think so. I think so. Well, then what's our excuse? Does Jesus not go out of his way to get our attention? I think he does. I think he does. I mean, have you ever tried to do something so hard and it just doesn't work out? And over again, someone's like, saying, it's like the little voice in your head, and it's God saying, I really don't want you to do that. And then you just keep doing it. I really don't want you to do that. I don't think this is the best thing for you. Your spouse may say it, your friends may say it, your kids may say it, and you just keep doing it. Anybody else guilty of that? No, y'all are all perfect. Y'all are all on the right train, right? It's just me that's on the bad train. Of course we do. But Jesus goes out of his way to get our attention. He just does. He does it in obvious ways, and he does it in ways that we can't fully comprehend or explain. But he does. Because, see, he's on that train, like Gerald says, next to us, and he really wants us to get off, the one that's going off the cliff. I mean, that's the mission of the church, right? To give the good news of Jesus Christ, to tell people you don't have to go off the cliff. You don't. You don't. You can get off of that train. You can get off of that path to destruction. The Holy Spirit that is prompting your heart, that's tugging at you, that's saying, stop what you're doing and do something different. Join with Jesus Christ. Give your life over to him. Become what he wants you to be, is the Jesus trying his best to get your attention. And he'll do many number of things to make that happen. So, finally, we understand that God, in seeking to get our attention, he puts the right people in our lives to help us to get where we need to be. And this is what happened for Saul. He's going down the wrong road, or on the wrong track. Jesus gets his attention. And then he has the people there, the men there. And the Lord had prepared Ananias to help him once he got to Damascus, to make sure that he would be on solid footing and be ready. And God's doing that for you too. He's doing that for all of us. All of us have that opportunity to change the direction where we're going, to follow him. And the Lord will do whatever it takes to get our attention. And the Lord will put the right people in our lives to help us through that situation, whatever that situation is. I thank God for all the people that he has put in my life to help me understand where I'm going and how to arrive at the place where I need to be. Because God has put so many people in my life. I could write book after book after book of them. I'm just trying to get through one at this moment in time, but it could keep going forever and ever, of the people that God has used to guide me, to direct me, to help me. And he does that for you too. Why does he do this? Why does he do this? The one thing I learned from all of this, from this passage, from this journey that we've been on, from this situation of we're seeking to become more of what God intends for us, the one thing that I've learned is that all of us struggle with that. We all do. Sometimes I lose confidence in myself. Well, maybe I'm really not that great of a preacher. If I were better, maybe more people would come, or more people would tune in, or they'd be more inspired. I lose a little bit of confidence. And then God goes, but wait a minute. You preach pretty good, sound pretty good to me. Someone like Rob says, I got so much out of your message, Pastor Roger. Thank you. And I'm like, well, if it was good enough for him, I guess I can write another one and try it again. And sometimes I don't think I'm the best father. I have a teenage daughter. Sometimes she looks at me and just looks at me like, I mean, what's wrong with you, Dad? Why are you wearing that? Why do you look like that? And I think, man, what am I doing wrong? What have I done so wrong? But then she comes and she gives me that hug, or she tells me, just a random moment, I love you, Dad. I'm like, oh, that's it. I guess I can be a nerd and keep going, right? It's okay. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm the best husband, right? Surely there's times where we mess up and we get angry and we say things we don't mean, and and then my wife gives me a hug because I made her a hot dog at a bonfire last night. She says, "You've never made me a hot dog before." I go, "I've never made you a hot dog? And you didn't even ask. And you got a hot dog." So you see? Oh. If all of these these are just small examples of my life. But this isn't about just my life. This is about our life. It's about your life. All the things that God can do in your life. Why? Because His grace is sufficient. His grace is enough. It's all about His grace anyway. We are the reason that we're on the train going off the track. That's not God's fault. That's whose fault? That's my fault. Now, I didn't do anything, but I was born onto that train, so it's still my fault. Doesn't matter. It's our fault that we're the ones going into that pit of destruction. And yet God's grace is enough to come up alongside of us and say, "Hey, guess what? I built a new train over here. You want to come on over? Come on." It's our fault that the things that we experience, that we endure, sometimes it isn't our fault, but it's just a situation of sin or the situation that we find ourselves in. But God's grace is enough. It's sufficient. The things that we experience, the depression or the anxiety or the just feeling like we can't accomplish what we want in the time that we want, the anger, God's grace is enough to release us from all of that. The pressure that we feel from family and friends and ourselves and our world, and the responsibilities that we feel to have to make everything the way it needs to be. God's grace is enough. It's sufficient to get us through all of that. You see, God's grace is sufficient, even for you. The Apostle Paul, he made that his ministry. If Peter was the pot that slowly comes to a boil, right? It took him a while to kind of catch on a little bit. We talked about that last week. Paul was like the steam engine that was just bam, full throttle immediately. Because no sooner that he received his sight and became a Christian, he's ready to go preach the good news of Jesus Christ. And people are like, "Now wait a minute, now aren't you the guy that's trying to lock us all up?" So much so that they had to move him. They had to send him back home for a while. He had to prepare himself. He was ready to go immediately, though. Here's the good news. Paul talks about this. His life is all about God's grace. Here's the good news for today. Regardless of whatever you're dealing with. He talked about a thorn in his flesh. We don't know what it is. It could be so many things. Here's the good news. Whatever it is that has got you, God's grace is sufficient. It's enough to allow you to become everything you're called to become. And once you get that grace, once you get it, you can open your eyes and you can say, "I can see."